The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I never realized how much life a house could hold until it was gone. The echoes of laughter, the faint hum of the TV left on in the background, the familiar shuffle of feet on the hardwood floor, it had all vanished. In its place was a hollow emptiness, a space that no longer felt like mine. I stood in the doorway, staring into the dimly lit living room. The furniture was exactly where we had left it, the scent of her perfume still lingering faintly in the air. Yet everything felt different. Off. My wife, Lorna, wasn't home yet. But she would be soon. Tonight was her bachelorette party. The last big celebration before we were supposed to start our lives together as husband and wife. I should have been happy for her, excited even. Instead, I was here, standing in the house we had built together, drowning in the kind of silence that made my ears ring. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The lock clicked into place with an almost final sound. My eyes wandered toward the staircase, the path leading up to our bedroom. A place that had once been ours. A place where I had felt safe. But tonight, it felt like enemy territory. I forced myself to move forward, my feet feeling heavier with each step. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to feel when I walked into the bedroom, but as my eyes landed on the small, neatly folded envelope resting on the dresser, my stomach twisted into knots. It was addressed to her. She didn't know it yet, but this was the moment that would change everything. Lorna had no idea that while she had been out celebrating her so-called final night of freedom, I had spent the past few weeks uncovering the truth, the kind of truth that made your skin crawl. The kind that shattered every illusion you had ever held about the person you loved. I reached for the envelope, running my fingers along its edges. Inside was the kind of farewell she never expected. And soon, she would walk into this house, still buzzing from the excitement of the night, only to find it stripped of everything familiar. She would step into a home that was no longer hers. And when she found that letter, she would finally understand why. I stared at the letter on the dresser, my fingers lingering over its edge. It was heavier than paper should be, maybe because of everything it carried. Truth, pain, finality. I had written it over and over, trying to find the right words, but there was no right way to tell someone their life was falling apart. Lorna would be home any minute now. I imagined the scene unfolding in my head, the front door creaking open, her heels clicking against the floor, her voice, still tinged with the excitement of the night, calling out my name. She'd expect to see me in bed, or maybe waiting for her downstairs with some late-night food. She had no idea what was waiting for her instead. My mind drifted back to how I got here. It started as nothing, just a feeling. A hesitation in her voice when she told me about the bachelorette party plans. A lingering glance at her phone, a quick swipe to hide a notification. The kind of thing you tell yourself doesn't mean anything because you want to believe that it doesn't. But then the little things started piling up. Unanswered texts, late nights, a sudden shift in the way she looked at me. It was subtle, but once you start seeing the cracks, you can't unsee them. I wasn't supposed to know where her party was. She had been vague about it, said her friends were planning a surprise. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind. So I did what any man with a sinking feeling in his gut would do. I found out for myself. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. I almost wanted to be wrong. But when I parked across the street from that rented house and saw the scene through the window, every hope I had left burned to the ground. It wasn't a party. Not really. Not in the way she had made it seem. I saw her through the glass, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Relaxed, wild, free. But she wasn't laughing with her friends. She wasn't surrounded by a circle of women taking silly shots and reminiscing about old times. She was with him. I didn't know who he was at first. Just some guy, someone too comfortable with her, someone who had his hands on my fiancée like he had done it 100 times before. But when she leaned in, when she kissed him like she had forgotten I existed, something inside me snapped into place. It wasn't shock. It wasn't rage. It was something colder. Clarity. I sat there for what felt like hours, watching through the windshield, waiting for the moment I would wake up from this nightmare. But it never came. By the time she stumbled into that Uber, her hair messy, her lipstick faded, I had already made my decision. I drove home first. I wanted her to walk into the aftermath of what she had done. I wanted her to feel that drop in her stomach, that slow, creeping horror when she realized something was wrong. When she realized that I knew. So I packed my bags, left my key on the counter, and wrote the letter. And now, standing in the half-lit bedroom, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Any minute now, she'd walk through that door. And the life she thought she had, the future she believed was waiting for her, would crumble the second she read those words. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream or break things. I just needed to be gone. And when she found herself standing in this house, surrounded by nothing but the weight of her choices, she'd finally understand what she had lost. The air inside the house was thick with silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that settles between two people who understand each other without words, but the suffocating kind, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes you realize something is very, very wrong. I didn't have to wait long. The faint hum of a car pulling into the driveway broke through the quiet, followed by the unmistakable sound of high heels clicking against pavement. My stomach twisted, but not from regret. There was no regret, only the strange sensation of watching the last chapter of something that should have never made it this far. A key rattled in the lock. She was home. I didn't need to see her to know what she looked like at that moment. I could picture it perfectly. Her dress slightly wrinkled from the hours she had spent at the party, her makeup still clinging on but beginning to fade. The scent of alcohol, perfume, and something else, something she thought I would never notice, would linger in the air as she stepped inside, expecting everything to be just as she left it. But it wasn't. The first thing she would notice was the emptiness. The missing shoes by the door. The lack of my jacket hanging on the hook. The absence of the usual signs that told her I was home, waiting for her. I could imagine the pause, the hesitation in her movements as she pushed the door open fully, stepping into the space that had suddenly turned unfamiliar. The way her smile, if she even had one left, would falter just slightly. She'd probably shake it off at first, convincing herself that I had simply gone to bed, that nothing was wrong, that everything was fine. But it wasn't. And soon, she would know it. I heard her heels against the floor, each step slow and measured. She called my name, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and expectation. But there was no response. Just silence. She moved through the house, her steps growing quicker, her breathing becoming just a little more uneven. I could almost hear her thoughts. Where is he? Why is it so quiet? Then, finally, the moment came. The bedroom door creaked open. A sharp intake of breath. She had seen it. The letter. I had placed it right there, on her dresser, where she couldn't miss it. Next to it, something even more damning, her engagement ring, cold and lifeless against the wood. For a moment, nothing. Then, the rustle of paper as she picked up the envelope, her fingers hesitating on the seal. I could almost feel the weight of her realization sinking in. She had no idea how much I knew. Not yet. But she was about to find out. Lorna's fingers trembled as she held the envelope, though I doubted she realized it yet. The mind plays tricks when it doesn't want to face the truth. Maybe she thought it was a sweet note, something romantic I had left for her as a surprise. Maybe she assumed it was some kind of playful message, teasing her about her night out, something lighthearted, something that didn't spell the end. But then she saw it, the engagement ring. I had placed it right beside the letter, perfectly positioned so that the soft glow from the bedside lamp made it glisten just enough to catch her eye. It wasn't on her dresser as a symbol of love anymore. It wasn't a promise. It was an ending. A sharp inhale. A barely audible gasp. She knew. I imagined the way her stomach dropped, the way her heartbeat suddenly felt too loud in her ears. Her world had just tilted, but she wasn't fully ready to let it crash down. Not yet. That's the thing about betrayal. It only feels real once the walls around it collapse. She pulled at the envelope seal. Slowly. Carefully. Like she wasn't sure she wanted to know what was inside. My words. Written with a steady hand. No anger. No pleading. No accusations that would invite an argument. Just the truth, delivered in a way that left no room for doubt. Lorna. You came home expecting to find me waiting for you. You assumed things would be the same as they were yesterday, or last week, or the last 6 years. But they aren't. They never will be again. I know. I know where you were. I know who you were with. I know what you did. And because of that, you no longer live here. The words weren't complex. They weren't cruel. But they were final. I had made sure of that. As she read, I pictured the way her face changed. At first, maybe a flicker of confusion, her brain scrambling for excuses before she even reached the real weight of the message. Then, the growing panic, the realization that this wasn't a joke, that I wasn't playing along with whatever twisted narrative she would try to spin. I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to give her a chance to explain. I was just gone. And so was everything she thought she had. Her suitcases were already packed. Not by me, I wasn't that generous. But I had taken the liberty of stacking them by the front door, a silent suggestion that she might want to use them. Her closet was half empty. The drawers that once held our memories, photos, letters, silly notes we used to leave for each other, were cleared out. Not in anger. Not in chaos. Just erased. She stood there for a long time. I knew she did. I knew because I had been watching the security feed from my car down the street, waiting for this moment. Watching her stand frozen in the bedroom that no longer belonged to her, clutching a letter that told her, in no uncertain terms, that the life she had built with me had shattered beyond repair. She turned slowly, scanning the room, maybe hoping for some sign that this wasn't real. Maybe thinking I'd come storming in, ready to fight for us. But I wasn't coming back. I had given her everything. Every piece of me. Every ounce of trust. Every late-night conversation where I held her through her fears. Every moment I built our future without hesitation. And in return, she had thrown it away, one secret at a time. The sound of her knees hitting the floor echoed through the house. I had seen enough. I turned off the feed, took one last deep breath, and drove away. She could keep the house. It wasn't mine anymore. Lorna sat on the bedroom floor, the letter still clenched in her hands. She wasn't crying, not yet. That would come later, when the weight of everything settled in. Right now, she was in shock, her mind racing through the possibilities, trying to stitch together an excuse, a loophole, anything that could undo what had just happened. But there was no undoing this. She wasn't ready to accept it yet, though. That was the thing about people like Lorna. They didn't see consequences until they were staring them in the face. I imagined her scanning the room. I was darting to the empty spaces where my things used to be. The missing watch from the dresser, the gaps in the closet, the shelves that once held our framed photos now wiped clean. She would notice it all now, the evidence of my absence pressing in on her like a tightening noose. She would scramble to her feet, phone in hand, already dialing my number, already rehearsing the first words she would say to try and pull me back in. Would she start with denial? Pretend she had no idea what I was talking about? Act like this was some sort of misunderstanding? Or would she go straight to damage control? Say it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, something meaningless that didn't deserve to destroy what we had built? I wouldn't know, because I had already blocked her number. By the time she hit call and heard the robotic voice telling her that the number she was trying to reach was no longer available, I imagined the panic would really start to settle in. Her fingers would fumble as she tried again. And again. And again. Blocked. Panic would turn into anger. She would storm out of the bedroom, maybe head downstairs, expecting to find me there, waiting to argue, waiting for her to explain. But she wouldn't find me. All she would find were the last traces of my departure, the missing pictures from the walls, the spaces where my shoes used to be by the front door, the note I had left on the kitchen counter, next to the apartment keys I had given up. I could almost hear the sound of her breath hitching when she saw it. A single line. You don't get to rewrite this story. That was all I had left to say. She could craft whatever version of events she wanted for her friends, for her family, for whoever would listen. She could spin the tale in a way that made her the victim, pretend I had left over nothing, pretend she had been blindsided. But we both knew the truth. And now, she was left alone with it. I wondered what she would do next. Would she scream? Would she collapse onto the floor, overwhelmed by the sudden emptiness of the house? Or would she do what she always did, find a way to shift the blame? Maybe she'd call her friends, the ones who had cheered her on while she danced in the arms of another man, and ask them what to do. Maybe they'd tell her it wasn't that bad, that I was being dramatic, that I'd cool off and come back. She would want to believe that. She would want to believe that this wasn't real, that this wasn't final. But the truth was, I was already gone. Not just from the house. From her. From the version of myself that had once believed in her. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Lorna paced the living room, her phone still clutched in her hand. The screen was dark now, the last failed call lingering in her recent history. She had tried everyone, me, my family, even a few of my friends who had once liked her. No answer. No response. Nothing but silence. That silence was starting to suffocate her. She turned in circles, scanning the space like she could find an explanation in the walls, like if she looked hard enough, she'd spot the missing piece that would make this all go away. The couch was still there, the kitchen still had food in the fridge, and the light still flickered when the wind blew too hard against the house, so why did it feel like everything had disappeared? She already knew why. Because I had disappeared. She moved back to the bedroom, her breathing uneven, her fingers gripping the doorframe as she stared at the note I left behind. It was still sitting on the kitchen counter, taunting her. My handwriting was precise, deliberate. No rushed scribbles, no shaky lines. Just clean, steady letters spelling out the end of her world. You don't get to rewrite this story. The weight of those words settled in her chest like a stone. She wanted to scream, to rip the note to shreds, to throw it in the trash and pretend it didn't mean anything. But she couldn't. Because it did. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in control of the narrative. She had always been good at that, twisting situations, bending the truth just enough to make herself look innocent, to make herself the victim. It was an art form she had perfected over the years, a skill that had allowed her to slip out of so many tight corners. But not this time. This time, there was nothing left to spin, nothing left to manipulate. Because I was gone, and the only thing left for her to face was herself. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands gripping the sheets, the same sheets we had once laid on together, whispering about our future, planning things that now felt like the memories of strangers. The weight of it all was unbearable. She had thought she had all the time in the world. She had thought that whatever she was doing, whatever thrill she had been chasing would never catch up to her. But it had. And now, the silence she had never feared before had become the only thing she could hear. She sat there for a long time, the darkness pressing in, the reality of it all wrapping around her like a chain. I imagined her staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in her head, trying to pinpoint the second she lost me. But the truth was, she had lost me long before tonight. She just hadn't noticed. Not until now. Lorna had always been good at pretending. She could smile through discomfort, laugh when she didn't mean it, and twist reality just enough to convince herself that everything was fine, even when it wasn't. But this time, there was no pretending. She was alone. For the first time in years, she had no safety net. No soft place to land. No backup plan waiting in the wings to catch her when things went wrong. She had thought she could have it all. The thrill of reckless choices, the comfort of my love waiting for her at home, the security of a life built on trust she never truly deserved. But now, she sat in the wreckage of her own making, staring at the spaces where my presence used to be. The house felt bigger now, emptier. The shadows stretched across the walls in unfamiliar ways, twisting around the furniture like reminders of what had been lost. I wondered how long she would sit there, gripping the letter like it could somehow change the reality she had created for herself. Would she read it again, searching for loopholes? Would she trace over my words, looking for hesitation, for anything that suggested I wasn't serious? She would find nothing, because I had meant every word. She could call me 1,000 times. I would never answer. She could cry, scream, break things, beg. None of it mattered. I wasn't coming back. I had loved her once. More than anything. But love doesn't survive betrayal. And now, she was left with nothing but the echo of what she destroyed. And that was something she would have to live with. Every single day. The road stretched ahead of me, endless and open. The night air felt crisp against my skin as I rolled the window down, breathing in the kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The city lights faded in my rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller until they were nothing but distant memories. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from something, I was heading towards something new. Lorna's chapter in my life was closed. Sealed. Irrevocable. She could scream, cry, rewrite the story in her head however she wanted, but the truth remained. She had made her choices. And so had I. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for months, maybe years, was gone. The pain of betrayal, the anger, the sadness, all of it was slipping away with every mile I put between myself and the house that no longer held me prisoner. For so long, I had believed that my happiness was tied to her, that my future couldn't exist without the life we had planned. But I was wrong. Happiness wasn't in the past. It wasn't in the woman who had broken me. It was in the road ahead. It was in the possibilities waiting for me in a future I had never dared to imagine. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was finally free. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.